Welcome to the Homeschool High School podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and I am so excited to have a person I have really admired for a while to talk to. So, this today is Natalie Burton, and I met Natalie through our friend Anita Gibson. And Natalie is kind of like the behind the scenes person that does all kinds of things. So she works with Anita on national homeschool advocacy. I can say this advocacy.
Yes.
Y'all worked together on a conference a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was watching, I love watching the backstory because I worked on conferences myself, and I'm watching everybody working behind the scenes and just the amount of grace going on. It was just lovely. But anyway, every place I run into Natalie, there is just grace coming. And so I was asking her how she does homeschooling and marriage and serving the Lord and helping out all these people and being a good person at the same time. So now we want to talk about homeschool and life balance. But first, Natalie, would you say hey to everybody and tell us about your homeschool story?
Well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. Homeschooling has always been a part of my life because I was actually homeschooled from second grade to graduation.
I didn't realize you're second generation.
Yes. And so when my mom first started homeschooling me, I absolutely hated it. And I went kicking and screaming. But by the end of that first year, I told her, I'm so glad you brought me home because I loved it. And I pretty much decided as a child that I was going to homeschool my kids. Whenever I tell people that, they're like, really? But yeah, when I was 9 or 10, I decided, okay, I'm going to homeschool my kids. So by the time I met my husband, we met at 21. We were both 21. I kind of told him, hey, I don't know if you're familiar with homeschooling, but if you're not comfortable with that, maybe we shouldn't go out because that's what I'm going to be doing.
That was the deal breaker in the relationship. Yep. That's
and
awesome.
He actually agreed with it at that time, knowing nothing about homeschooling. And we had our children. We started homeschooling, and he was learning everything on the go, but he loved it. He's always supported it. And so we started homeschooling our kids with our first child. We never considered anything else. And this is how many years have I been homeschooling now? 5 years. I think it's my 5th year.
Awesome.
Yep. So that's how this all got started.
Tell us about your kids.
So I have 4 kids. My oldest is almost 10. She'll be 10 in a month and a half. And then I have an 8-year-old, and I have a 5-year-old, and I have a 3-year-old. So all my older 3 are girls, and my youngest, my 3-year-old, is a boy. Yes.
I had the opposite. So I had 4 boys and 1 girl.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
She ran the show. That was just how that worked.
Yep. He's the same.
So you've got years ahead of you of homeschooling joy, but you have learned so much about balancing everything so far. And it takes a lot of faith and intention to get through, especially for that age, because education is kind of intensive at that stage. So tell us about what your life looks like. So like, how do you got church, like you guys have some kind of ministry, like you'll have to mention that. And how do you do it? How do you do all the things?
Honestly, it's just leaning on the Lord. I know that sounds cliche, but when people talk about balance, I don't know what that is. We don't have balance. We're kind of juggling everything. And in some seasons, one thing will take precedent, and that's what we're focusing more on. And then it switches around in the next season. And so, earlier on in my journey of being a wife, a mom, a homeschool mom, that was really hard for me. I felt so out of control, and just everything felt hard all the time. And it wasn't until I began to learn to just kind of let things be and realize, okay, it's not going to be perfect. There's not going to be that equal balance. Once I really got that in my head, it started to open up for me more. Like our homeschooling got better for me and our kids. We now homeschool year round, which is we can take breaks whenever we want. We don't like the strict schedule of like, we got to go this many weeks so we can stop. So flowing with that, my husband, so we actually just became members of my dad-in-law's church. My dad is a pastor. Um,
Oh,
and so we have now joined the family ministry. My
oh.
husband is actually on his journey to becoming a preacher. My
Mm,
sister-in-law is a
mhm.
preacher. So now we're all involved with that, and that's been a really fun journey.
Mhm.
Like the balance is just, it's not balanced. Whenever I read things like that, I'm like, how are y'all balancing it? Because we just kind of go, God, what do you want us to focus on right now? What's the most important thing? And just be listening for his voice. And
Mhm.
then, like you said, grace. I have to give
Mhm.
myself grace so I
Yeah.
can give my kids grace.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah.
how we do it.
Yeah. Well, you said so many things all in that short time that are life changing. So yeah, balance doesn't look like there's like everything's equally done to perfection. It means what's important today, and you're juggling everything.
Yep.
So reminds me of one of our friends would say every day you get up in the morning juggling a bunch of balls and you decide which ones you're going to drop that
Yep.
day.
Yes.
So yours is, God, what's important today? What's the priority? And that's what you concentrate on. And the other thing you said is the most important thing. Like, there's no perfection. Like, the only place that's perfect is Pinterest.
It really,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm really not sure where, I mean, it's probably social media, or I don't know if it's comparison. I don't know where we get that from, that we
Mhm.
go into things thinking it has to look this way for it to be successful. But,
Mhm.
having children, I feel like, is one of the things that has helped me the most in that process, because the mistakes that you made, the times that you felt like you could have done better,
Mhm.
how stressed you were trying to put the lesson plans together and have everything ready for your kids, and then you drop the ball on certain things, but then they are still growing. They
Mhm.
still love you. They're still developing, and you're so proud of them. And you're like, wow, they've done so much of this, and it had nothing to do with me. And then
Mhm.
you realize maybe I don't have to have it all together because my kids are turning out just fine. I'm still fine, so they
Yes.
start to lighten up. At least that's what happened for me.
Yeah. And so you guys are really walking in grace. And that's the like our strength comes from God, and not our ability to be perfect. And I
Exactly.
really, really appreciate that role modeling. I was telling you before we started recording here, I love reading your Facebook posts because every one of them are full of grace. And I don't know whether you've noticed that,
I did
but
not.
a lot of people when they're on social media will kind of be ratcheted up,
Mhm.
and everything in yours has just a tone of grace. Like you guys have learned to walk in that graciousness of God. And so one of the things I noticed was a car accident where you guys got rear-ended, and you weren't, like spewing ugly things about the person who caused the accident. You were talking about how grateful you were. You guys were okay, and it was just like this is a good role model for kids.
Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for that for sure. Thank you.
So where did you learn that? Like, how did you learn to just be living in that this is not perfect? God gives me strength and grace. Like, how did that come to you?
Honestly, I think over years of repeated trials, we'll just have to do a podcast for another day with my testimony in it. But I went through a lot as a child and as a young
Mhm.
adult, and even early on in my marriage. It's just kind of one of those things where when you keep trying to do it your way and it's
Mhm.
not working,
Mhm.
you may even hit a rock bottom or two.
Mhm.
At that rock bottom, all that's there is God's love and grace. And you
Mhm.
learn, I have to lean on this if I'm
Mhm.
ever going to walk this thing called life.
Mhm.
And then it's just wanting to stay connected to that. I know what it's like getting inside of my own head and living with anxiety and, living with frustration. And
Mhm.
at this point in my life, I try really hard not to let myself go back there and just to lean into the grace that God does provide. It's provided for us. So, my life is not always easy,
Mhm.
but I'm grateful that I have the choice to choose Christ and not
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good testimony. Is that by the struggles in life, we could all be anxious hot messes
myself.
or overly demanding on our kids. Like their homeschooling needs to be perfect to show us off.
Yep.
So, but instead, if we trust God through the process, what you find is your kids are learning and they do some of that on their own, and it
Cool.
may not be perfect, but they're learning. So
Yes,
that
and when you start having grace for yourself, you realize, wow, my kids are exactly like me. We're the same.
yeah,
Then I realized
yeah,
it's not me that has it all together that's trying to show them something. It's we're kind of all learning as a family, and we all need the
yeah,
grace and the lesson and the time.
yeah. So, there's so many of us homeschool moms that homeschool multiple ages. So
Mhm.
you definitely have the multiple ages in your house. So can you think, and I'm just springing this on you at the last minute here, can you think of some things that you have been able to do as a family, to get all four kids in, that they were nice moments in your all of life is education, so it counts,
Yeah.
like field trips or reading books, or what works for your multiple age kids?
Um, a variety of things because
Mm,
my children's learning styles are so different.
mm,
I have one who really thrives with book work because they like the predictability of knowing what's
mhm,
expected of them. And then I have
mhm,
a couple mavericks who are like, I need to just stretch out everywhere and express myself. So
mhm,
we found that just kind of letting everyone gather together, but they can be working on their own thing,
mm,
makes it
mhm,
so that
mhm.
it functions. We tried doing curriculum where it's one lesson and there's a part for everyone.
Uh-huh.
Didn't
Mhm,
work for very long. So my older two, because they're really good readers, they're a little more independent.
mhm.
So they're happy to start what they need to do, and then I can go with my younger ones, and we can get out the blocks and the coloring, and that combined with just letting them have freedom. If my kids say I really need a break right now, I just want to color, I'm like, hey, do what you need to do, because if you don't want to be here, you're not learning anyway. We'll circle back around in an hour, and just giving
Yes.
freedom.
That packed with wisdom there, and so what you again, it's the grace that keeps coming through. Is you might have a schedule in your mind, this is what should be happening now, and to know when the kids are over it and no education's going to happen and they need a break for a little bit, and
Yep.
when they get whatever's under their skin out of the way and come back, they're ready to do the education
They
again.
are. I threw my plans out the window a long time ago
Yeah.
because the Lord will keep interrupting them anyway. As soon as you're like, "This is what I'm going to do," God's like, "Oh, really?" So I just took my hands off.
That's like my Vicky version of the scripture is, a mom's mind plans her way, but God
Right.
directs her path.
I love that. You should get T-shirts with that on it.
Yeah.
I feel like those would do so well.
Because we do, like, we have ideas of what we'd like to see happen, and God always has a different program, and that is good because He's smarter than we
Yeah,
are.
I was
So
gonna say, and every time that happens, I realize how much better it was His way than what I thought we needed, and I'm like, okay, I gotta just sit with that and realize again, God, you know what you're doing.
so you have your oldest is in double digits.
Yeah, well, almost.
So
Yeah.
so that means in a few years you're going to be homeschooling high school with some youngers.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember when you were homeschooling high school?
Mhm.
What was useful to you? Like what made homeschooling high school work for you that you may experiment with your kids?
Oh man, let me think about that. I know the homeschool group that I was in at the time had a lot for the teens. So
Mm,
the social aspect of it was there.
uh-huh.
We had a prom, we had homecoming, and
Yeah.
living close to a lot of my friends.
Mm,
One of the benefits of homeschooling is when all the other public school kids were in school, we were all on the same time schedule. So we could call
mhm.
up and say, hey, let's go roller skating or whatever. And everybody was
Yeah.
available. And
Mhm.
so that's something I do with my kids now is we do a lot of outings. And I'm planning on making sure that that continues when they're high schoolers. So prayerfully, that's what happens. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah. And what a blessing to be in a community where there were activities that were fun, like proms and all. And then friends who were also homeschooling, and you guys could go make the most of the times that
Yep.
work with homeschooling. So I know for my kids, we had an umbrella school
Mhm.
also
Yeah.
and a homeschool support group. So they could pull on several different pockets of homeschool friends to do like even homeschool field trips
Yeah.
turned out to be, like hilarious social events that they still talk about to these
Yes.
days because some disaster would happen. Um, and proms and things like that are really precious moments for high schoolers.
Yep. I think that's just what I remember most was just
Mm.
being a teenager in a safe environment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Do you think when your kids get older, knowing them,
Mhm.
there will be a like you'll lean towards putting them in one of the homeschool groups or the umbrella school you were in, or what do you think? I mean, you don't know, but really, as far
No,
as you can
the
tell
umbrella
now.
school that I was in, I'm not sure it's still around.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
But we are in an umbrella group. We're
Oh
in a
yeah.
homeschool group that we really, really love. And it
Hmm.
right now it only goes up to 8th grade. And I'm
Uh-huh.
praying that by the time mine get there, maybe they'll extend it.
Yes.
Really love it. They have community there.
Yeah.
So that was a blessing to find because I went through my same
Hmm.
homeschool group till graduation.
Hmm.
And I was praying that they would have a similar experience. And so right now they have that. And so I'm praying
Hmm.
that goes all the way till they graduate.
What do you think when you were homeschooling as a child? Like you started second grade
Mhm.
and you said, "This is what I'm going to do when I have kids." What do you think made homeschooling work for you as a young person?
I think it worked for me because I have always been very inquisitive and liked to dabble in a lot of different things.
Hmm.
I've always been an avid reader and wanted more time for that. And homeschooling gave me the opportunity to touch on everything that I was interested in.
Hmm.
I have one sister, she was homeschooled with me, and her and I used to come up with all types of science projects and
Oh,
we go through the woods, like making pirate maps and exploring. And my mom took us to every museum imaginable. I had
so
such a fun experience just learning about the world.
yeah.
And I knew that I wanted my kids to have that experience and the freedom. My
Yeah.
mom made sure we got our work done, but we didn't have,
Hmm.
a certain hour mark where we had to have
Hmm.
it done by. So I also learned independence very early. And when I got to college, it was a breeze for me. It just made
Hmm.
sense. It made
Yeah.
sense once I got to be a little older and saw my experience versus some other kids' experiences in public
Hmm.
school. It just was different, and I knew
Hmm.
that homeschooling was what I wanted to repeat for my kids.
That is so beautiful. What wonderful experiences and just the people around you that helped let you be who you were
Yep.
as a young person. So you're carrying that legacy on to the next generation.
Yes.
And then the other hat you wear in between everything else is you do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So virtual assisting and again, it's always anything that you ever send to me is always such a friendly, gracious tone about it.
Thank you.
They're like, Natalie sent me an email. She wants a post out of me. That's
Oh.
great because Natalie, it just makes me want to do it.
Oh.
Um, so I send posts to National Homeschool Advocacy and help, with that
Yes.
organization. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got connected there? Like what brought that about?
So years ago, it must have been 8 years at this point. Miss Anita came to me and asked me if I would just help her with some things that she was working on. And at
Mhm,
that point, I had no idea what virtual assisting was,
mhm,
none of that. I just agreed to help her. And it kind of just went from there. Once I learned that this is something you can do
mhm.
as a job,
Yeah.
I kind of pursued that and started to build my skills with that. And it's just been something I've been doing ever since because it's flexible enough for me to do it while I'm at home with my kids, which
Mhm,
was very important to me. And I also like that I can scale it up more if I need to, and I can scale it back more if I need to by deciding how
mhm.
many clients to take. So that's just been something that kind of dropped into my lap that turned out to be something really great for my life.
So another example of God directing your path.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yep.
So it fits your talents and it's really a help.
Mhm.
Like we can't do anything by ourselves, I don't think, in the kingdom of God, really. We're supposed to be teams. So you're really an integral part of making NHA work and all the other places where you help with the VAing. So thank
Yes,
you for doing that.
grateful for the opportunity for Miss
Yeah.
giving me that.
So if there's another mom who has multiple kids at home
Yeah.
and is, thinking about, oh, I'm going to have to bring in a little bit of income on top of homeschooling and church and being involved there and being a wife and mom and all these things.
Mhm.
What are a couple of pieces of advice you'd like to give them?
Oh, advice. I would say pick something that you can do that aligns with your strengths and what you enjoy doing.
Mhm,
I like organizing, so virtual assisting works for me because I like seeing things come into order.
mhm,
Just give yourself a chance to get it going.
mhm,
It doesn't always equal up to what you imagined right away,
mhm.
but if you stay consistent, it can become a huge blessing for you and your family.
That is a good little bit of advice. And then what advice could you give them about being able to stay in that trust and grace rather than, oh my gosh, I've got to have this perfect life?
Oh man, for me, I'd say the biggest piece is making sure that I read my word every day because it
Mm,
grounds me out of me think.
mm,
It grounds me out of the scatterbrained feeling that I often
yeah,
encounter.
yeah.
It just reminds me that, like I said before, like I have the choice. I can choose
Hmm.
grace. I can choose Christ. I can choose
Yeah,
peace. It's
yeah,
available for me.
yes. Yeah. So if you ever want to run into Natalie, over on Facebook at National Homeschool Advocacy or simply homeschool, right? Or
Yes,
simply
yes.
homeschooling.
Simply
I'll,
Homeschool by NHA.
yeah, so I'll put links in the show notes there. And you just kind of, she's just there. She's just making things happen.
I'm all throughout. You'll see me there.
Yeah. And I'll put links to NHA also so people can
Yes,
check out
please.
because it's such a good group and doing good things in the homeschool community. So, Natalie, thanks for being just this light of grace in the world.
Thank
I
you for
really
having
appreciate
me.
it.
I appreciate
And
you.
and thanks for spending some time with me. I know in between homeschooling and VAing and all the rest of life, you
We're
had
on
to
summer
drop
break now.
everybody
Okay, it's summertime.
in between homeschooling year round, you said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, so thank you so much again. And I really, really hope you guys have a very blessed day because you gave this time to us. So
Thank
thanks so
you.
much.
Same to you.
Yeah. So this has been the Homeschool High School podcast brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks to Seth Tillman for editing. And we will see you all next week.